Let's start off by talking about what is software engineering. Let me give you a formal definition. Software engineering is a systematic, planned approach to the development, maintenance, and retirement of software. Now, that all sounds very formal and interesting. Why do we care about that? Well, let's take a look at some of the common problems that we see over and over again in various types of software engineering or software products. Software projects are frequently late. Maybe we've even gotten it out on time in this condition, but it doesn't meet what the customer wanted in the first place, so nobody wants the product. Maybe we got it out on time this time. It did everything the customer wanted, but we can't seem to do it again for the next release of the product. Or we've delivered a product on time. It's got really good functionality in it. The customer loves it, but it's full of numerous defects, and so causes the customer lots and lots of problems. Let me tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from. I work for a company called Lumberja, which is a large company, $6.33 billion in sales, that nobody's ever heard of. We exist in over 100 countries with people working with us from nationalities from all of those countries and more. We're very decentralized and very individualistic. Now, how does this relate to software engineering? What we were seeing in Lumberja was that the percentage of software in our products has been growing over the number of years, say from 20 years ago, where software was just a small percentage of part of our products. It's now up to 50 to even 100% of products that we sell. Our workforce isn't composed strictly of software engineers or computer scientists either. We have mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, double E's, working on our software products. What does this mean? This means that the workforce might not initially have gotten trained in any kind of software engineering techniques. Our management staff is very technical, but not necessarily technical in the software engineering field, which we also find has been an issue that we've had to solve. And because of these and other issues, there's a perception that software is out of control. Let's take a look at the engineering centers at Lumberja. We have a wide range of the types of engineering centers that work on services and products in the company, ranging in size from 5 to 180 engineers at one site. The products are everything from 4-bit micros to running on large parallel supercomputers. Some of the development is done only at one particular location. Some of the development for some of the systems is done at locations all over the world. One particular product could be developed in Austin, with pieces put onto it in Paris, Tokyo, and Houston. This adds to the complexity of the software engineering problems that we face. So how did we approach this problem of getting the software engineering and software development at Lumberja under control? What we did was take a look at the work that was going on and is still going on at Carnegie Mellon University's Software Engineering Institute, or SEI. The SEI at CMU has developed what they call a capability maturity model that can be used to assess the maturity of a software organization. This technique is also very helpful for ISO, the International Standards Organization's 9000 series certification, which is a quality measurement that organizations all over the world are taking a look at right now. Now, at Lumberja, in the Lumberja Laboratory for Computer Science, a small group called Software Practices began using the process assessments at CMU to assess the maturity of software organizations all over the company. Let me tell you a little bit more detail about the SEI's software engineering assessment. There are 5 levels in the software maturity scale as defined by the SEI. You'll note these on the slide. Reading from the bottom up, level 1 is the most immature level, and it's the level that most organizations find themselves at when they're going through initial assessments. As you move up the maturity scale, organizations become more and more mature in the manner in which they develop software, in the way in which software is developed and managed in relation to other parts of the organization, on up to level 5, which you see is the top level on the chart, which is the level to which all software organizations are now hoping to achieve. Let's take a look at each of these levels in more detail. Level 1, the level that most organizations will find themselves at when they're initially assessed, is what I would call the heroes level. Organizations at level 1 can certainly deliver software products, but what these organizations find is that they have to rely on heroes in the organization to get the products actually out to the market on time with the right functionality. Level 2, the repeatable level, has a focus on project management. Organizations that are assessed to be at level 2 have gotten their projects under control in several key areas. You'll see the key areas listed on this slide and for subsequent slides talking about levels 3, 4, and 5. The key process areas for a level 2 organization means that the organization knows how to begin management and control of the software projects on which they're working and on the defects and quality of those software projects. Everything from software project planning and tracking, through contractor management, through quality assurance, on up to, do we have the software under configuration management? How do we handle requirements that come in? How do we handle requirements that change as the project is under development? Level 3 is known as the defined level. In this particular level of the Software Engineering Institute scale, the organization has a defined process that is used to develop the software. The organization has a focus on the process. It has incorporated peer reviews into the process, which means that peers are taking a look at the software being developed in a very methodical way to make sure that quality is built in even before testing of the product starts. There's also a training program that's part of a level 3 organization so that the engineers on the staff are trained in a particular way and understand what's needed for the products on which they work. Other parts of the level 3 assessment include intergroup coordination, product engineering, so that the entire product team is involved in what does it mean to put together this software product, and just an integrated software management as a whole, meaning that the management of software products is integrated into the entire management of the organization. The next two levels, level 4 and level 5 of the SEI scale, are levels to which most software organizations are now striving. You won't find too many software organizations that are currently being assessed at level 4 or level 5, so this is our goal. The level 4 is the managed organization. There's both a product and a process quality focus. What this means to be a level 4 organization says, not only do we have a process that's written, but we take a look at this process, we manage everything that we do carefully by this process, and we analyze the process to make sure that it's working. The other key process area of level 4 is the area of quality management. Not only are we making sure that we know the defects that we have in the product, that we're keeping track of them and trying to fix them, but it also means that we're trying to figure out ways in which we can better produce our products so that the quality is managed from the beginning and completely part of the product when it finally ships. Level 5, the top level of the SEI scale, is the optimizing level. At this scale, an organization is always questioning, am I doing everything that I possibly can? What could I possibly improve on? Questioning over and over again, how can I improve my process? An interesting thing that you would find in a level 5 organization is that, let's say that a defect was found in a software project. The organization would not just go fix the defect, ship it out to the customers. The organization would take a look back saying, how in the world did this defect even get into the process? How did we slip up so that this defect occurred? Let's look back in the process. Where should we have found it? And what can we do to change the process so this kind of slip up will never happen again? It's a very, very mature organization that can take a look at not only fixing problems, but how can we make sure that this type of problem is never allowed to happen again? The SEI assessment technique, in its most formal sense, has a number of steps that the SEI recommends that organizations use. Let me talk about those first, and then I'll tell you how we slightly modified this technique at Lumberja to give you some hints on what you might do. The SEI technique in its formal approach is to use 5 to 8 trained professionals that come on site onto an organization for a week to perform the assessment. There's a questionnaire that accompanies these assessors that they use to talk with various project members, management members, marketing team members, to assess where the organization is, both by the answers that are given to this questionnaire and by the interviews that are conducted on site during this week. Let me talk about how we modified this technique to begin with at Lumberja. As you remember in the beginning, I talked about the fact that we have everything from engineering sites with 5 members to 180 members. We wanted to make sure that we didn't overwhelm the smaller sized engineering centers with a team of 5 to 8 personnel talking to 5 engineers on that site. So the way that we did this in the software practices group was one trained assessor would send the questionnaire to the organization prior to our visit. We would receive the answers to the questionnaire from this organization before we even went to the site, analyze it, visit the site for a day, maybe 2 days for an initial visit and interviews with key members of the organization. And at the end of that time, we would make a presentation to the senior management staff saying, this is where we find you in the SEI scale. Here are some of the key areas that we suggest you should take a look at first. What did we find during our initial visits to organizations in the first studies that we were doing? No surprise. As we visited many organizations, the same problems and therefore recommendations from the study individuals came up over and over again. Most of the organizations had not kept careful track of how long it had actually taken them to deliver a software product, how many resources were actually needed to work on that software product. They didn't necessarily know the number of defects that were in that product or what they had had to do to work on those defects. Because of these similar findings at many of the sites, the recommendations that we had to the organizations became quite similar. We told organizations to start tracking, if they weren't already doing so, what the size of their product deliverable was, how long did it take you to do it, how many people did you have working on that product during its various stages. We suggested that they start gathering data and using data about the testing that they had done on the product. How many defects were there in the product? How long did it take them to fix defects that they found in the product before they could ship? We also emphasized that it was important for the organizations to know how project commitments were made, to start getting handle on the requirements that were coming in for the product so that the organizations would know that the final product that was delivered was what had been requested to start with. After we made our initial visits to the Schlumberger organizations, we started going back for follow-up visits. Now for the follow-up visits, we used more what I would call the SEI Formal Technique. We still used the technique of sending the questionnaire to the organization before we visited. We had the organization fill out the questionnaire, return it to us for analysis. But we would visit the organization with 4 trained professionals. What we normally did was 2 people from the software practices group would visit the organization. Then 1 person from the organization itself would be involved on the assessment team. And an individual from a related organization, an organization doing a product similar to the organization being visited, would be the 4th member of the team. We would spend 3 to 4 days on site for the visit and slightly modified the SEI technique to shorten the number of feedback meetings that we had with the individuals at the organization. In this way, we could end the assessment in 3 to 4 days rather than requiring an entire week to do the assessment. Certainly the use of the SEI technique in the software process assessments motivated improvements all over the organization. But we found that just the assessment itself wasn't enough. There are 3 key parts to improving software and software products. These 3 parts are the process that's being used to develop the software, the technology that's being used to develop the software, and the people themselves. I'll talk a little bit more about each of these. Let me first focus on the area of people. What we found over and over again as we were doing the process assessments was that there was a need in the organizations around the company for training, particularly in software project management and in peer reviews. Let me tell you a little bit more about what we did in the area of software project management. We realized that people needed to be trained in how to better manage and produce software products. And what we first did was look in the outside in industry, for some software project management courses that we could license and bring inside the company to provide to all of the people. As we looked more and more, we couldn't find a course that exactly met the needs of the engineers at Schlumberger. So we made a decision to develop the course ourselves and to teach the course ourselves in-house. Now, what did this mean? This meant that we could, from the Software Practices Group, teach the course at any site that needed the training in software project management. We could have multiple people from that site attend the course together. Now, I think this turned out to be a key decision, which maybe we didn't realize to start with. In the past, people had certainly attended software project management courses, but they often attended maybe one or two people from the organization would attend the course, come back on site, and try to effect change. It's very difficult to do. What we found when we had multiple people from the same organization attending the course together, change actually happened. We'd have a critical mass of people that said, hey, these are the 2 or 3 ideas we got from the course that we really want to try out this time in our organization based on what our needs are. This worked very well. Another surprising thing that, again, I don't know that we were smart enough to know in the beginning how well it was going to work, was that we had the course offered on one site with multiple people from that site attending, but multiple people from other Schlumberger organizations would come and sit in the course at the same time. Well, the synergy between the groups because of this was fabulous. People in the organizations are still keeping up with each other, talking about common problems, common projects, or just saying, hey, have you tried to do this yet? We're about to go try to do this. How did it work in your organization? So cross-center synergy and working together has come out of the courses that we were teaching. We customized the duration of the course to between 1 and 4.5 days, depending on what the organization wanted. And we tried to hold the size of the class to 18 to 20, up to 22 people, just again to keep the class at a manageable size. Another decision that we made was to have the class taught by experienced software managers. I taught this class many times, so I'm speaking from what I did over and over again around the company. The thing that I think this brought to the classes was the fact that the trainers could talk about things that had happened to them in the past, both good and bad, I must admit. We had the ability to collaborate in class, come up with ideas saying, hey, let me tell you something that worked in the last project that I managed before I started teaching about how to manage. All of the trainers also became sources of, let's call them company war stories, so that to make the people in the class realize that they weren't alone in some of the problems they were having with software project management, we could talk about, well, at this other part of the company, let me tell you about this interesting situation that occurred and what the outcome of that was. The other thing that I think worked out well also was just that we taught the class a number of times and became a source of pointers to people in the class. I was able to stand in front of a class, hear about a situation and say, hey, have you given a call to, and name somebody in another organization that I knew was working on something very similar. This helped a lot. And so again, I think that having experienced people doing the teaching, experienced Schlumberger people doing the teaching, really added a lot both to the course's contents and to the credibility of the instructor. Let me give you another organization in the area of people, and again, I'll continue the focus briefly on training in this one. In one of the Schlumberger business units, the executive vice president of that business unit decided that he wanted his entire organization, this was about 460 software engineers, to have a common language to talk about software engineering and have a common process that was followed throughout the organization. Now, these engineers were not working on the same types of products, on the same size of products, but he felt that the common vocabulary and common practice of how we developed software would help the entire organization and help with intergroup communication. So what he did was ask us in software practices to help put together a course on software engineering for his entire organization. So we put together a team that consisted of people from the software practices group, as well as individuals in the various product groups in this business unit. We put together a course on software engineering. It was taught first to the person that had asked for it, to the executive VP and his staff. We then taught the course to the engineering managers in all of the organizations in this business unit and to the marketing managers in this organization. At that point, we began training the software developers in the group. Let's talk about how we did the training of all the software developers in this business unit. I mentioned earlier that there were over 460 software developers in this organization. Obviously, one or two people were not going to be able to handle this load. So what we decided to do was a train the trainer. We put together material, had two individuals from each of the product groups elected, selected, volunteered to be the trainers for their organization and to attend a training session that we held at the Schlumberger Lab for Computer Science in how to teach the course and the course material itself. Basically, these people were then assigned with other people in the organization to go to each of the engineering centers and, with two people as trainers, to train the engineers in those groups on the software engineering training. This worked very, very well. This group not only did a wonderful job of training, but they also became a source themselves and among themselves of things that were going well, things that weren't going well, etc., across the organization. Now, another thing that we did in each of these classes was make sure that the class wasn't just a 3 to 5 day lecture series that everybody would then return home and do things as they always had done. The individuals that took these classes had to fill out objectives for the classes, right? What is my objective here? What do I think I want to learn? And at the end of the class, they had to fill out an action plan saying, well, this is what I learned, and this is what I'm actually going to put into practice. Now, obviously, they kept copies of their action plans, but the executive VP that started all of the training also got copies of all of these action plans. And it became amazingly effective for him to walk into an organization, walk up to an individual with that person's action plan and say, so, how's it going with this thing you said you were going to be doing after you attended this class? It definitely kept the pressure on for the improvements that were suggested in the training. The other thing that we found as part of the training, and that's still going on in this organization, is that common software process guidelines, templates, and examples were developed that are being used in every one of these product groups around the world, so that they are indeed developing software and using the same vocabulary for that development of the software. One thing that we thought was important in the software practices group was to always improve what we were doing as well. The way we did this, and it's still being done, is to take a look at available technology, what's going on in industry, what's happening in academia, what's going on in our universities that we can use both for the training and for working with the organizations in collaborative projects. What we thought was important in the software practices group was not just to train about how to improve the software process or software development, but also to look at the technology, as I mentioned earlier, what could be brought into an organization to help improve the way things were done. We also wanted to use the collaboration as a way to improve future classes that we put together. So the circle that you saw on the previous slide is indeed what we tried to do. Find class material that was needed in the organization, present this to the organization, then collaborate with that group to actually try out some of the ideas that are in the classes and improve what we were teaching based on how well or poorly some of the parts of the collaboration went. This worked very well. What we also wanted to do in Schlumberger was make sure that the software developers had opportunities for other types of face-to-face interaction besides just being together in some of the courses and training sessions that we held. One of the things that we did was help put together software conferences on all sorts of topics, including process improvements, no surprise, human interface development, taking a look at case tools, particularly uppercase tools, and traveling around a lot to make sure that we met the people with whom we were working and knew what the problems were that they were facing. Besides the face-to-face communication, we wanted to come up with other ways to make sure that software developers and engineers around the company knew what was going on. One of the things that we did was actually put together 4 times a year a publication we call Software News, to which developers all over the company can submit articles, comments, stories about what's going on with the work that they're doing so that they can talk in a written form to other developers in the organization. Another form of written communication that we used was electronic bulletin boards. All of Schlumberger is connected via a corporate-wide computer network, and we used this network as means of sending electronic mail to engineers all over the organization. A couple of the bulletin boards are actually mainly focused on software engineering or software development topics. What we did to initially encourage the use of one of these bulletin boards was one member of the software practices group would post a message to the bulletin board with an obvious question or obvious error in it, and someone else in the software practices group would then respond to that question, again, on the electronic bulletin board. So we kind of helped make it look as if there was a lot of traffic on this bulletin board. Now there is. Basically, we don't find ourselves having to use this technique at all to keep real good information flowing among the members of the engineering community. There are also several technical publications that come out from members of the engineering community all over the corporation. We make sure that these are cited in the newsletter that I talked about earlier so that people again have a way to read about what's going on within the company regarding software development and software products. So let's talk about what the results have been. Overall, every organization in the company that has set improvement goals has moved up the SEI's maturity scale. This is really exciting. We found that this is due both to the assessments that are going on, obviously, to the interest in them, but also to the fact that we have seen a lot of, let's call it healthy, inter-organizational competition. Now we in the software practices group will never talk about what number or what level or how a particular organization was assessed. But if members of that organization want to talk about it with people in other organizations, that's fine. And certainly we found that people across the company were finding out that, oh, so-and-so organization is at a particular level. Gosh, we should certainly be that good. What can we do about this? And so there was good competition between the groups going on. We've also found overall that there's been much, much better project and product communication within the organizations, a lot of which has been motivated, if not caused, by all of the software improvement efforts, the ways to make software engineering better. Let me give you some specific examples. One organization that was developing real-time embedded systems had found in the past that they were having a lot of difficulty in getting requirements right. Now, what do I mean by this? In this organization, back in 1991, they had gone through 34 validation cycles before a product was finally shipped. The validation cycles were basically a period of the engineers would be finished with the product, the marketing people, salespeople would take a look at the product and go, oh, this isn't what we wanted. They would send it back to the engineers, who would go through another code, test, revalidate cycle, give it over to the people that were going to be selling it out into the world. Again, the product was brought back over and over again. What this group found once they started focusing on better managing their requirements from the beginning was that the number of validation cycles went from 34 down to 15. Their productivity doubled over a 2-year period. Very definite benefits by improving this particular aspect of software engineering. In a different part of the organization, the group found that they were having problems, starting in 1990, as the slide shows, in project planning and tracking. Back in 1990, it was not uncommon for a software product coming out of this organization to be 50% late. So 50% over the time they had thought it was going to take to develop it until they actually did develop it and get the product out to customers. By 1992, by focusing on better upfront project planning and keeping track of the project, careful track of the project throughout the development cycle, by 1992 they were only 5% over what they had initially planned as the amount of time it would take to get the product out to market. One more example on an improvement activity. One particular organization decided to really focus on quality assurance, to improving the quality of the product that they were delivering. By putting in steps to make sure they were doing peer reviews, looking for problems before they actually became defects in the product. They improved themselves from in 1990 having 0.22 defects per 1,000 lines of non-commented source code, that's KNCSS, to in 1992 having 0.15 defects per 1,000 lines of non-commented source statements. This particular organization also became ISO 9001 certified, so became certified with the ISO for the quality management that they were doing across the organization, not just in the software level. Let me expand a little more on this, particularly with the relationship between the SEI assessment technique and the ISO certification. We get asked this over and over again. ISO certification for software, ISO 9000-3, which is still part of the ISO 9001 overall quality certification, is just now being used in ISO audits. What we found as we talk with Schlumberger organizations that have been through the ISO audits is that they feel that having gone through the improvement process and using the SEI technique, that they're in a stronger position than ever before for the ISO audits. They have more material for the ISO auditors and feel that even with future changes in ISO requirements, they'll be ready to satisfy those changes. Let me tell you about the kinds of commitments that the different organizations around Schlumberger made, just to give you an idea of what your group might want to do as far as working on these software improvements. The larger engineering centers around the company, say 120 to 180 engineers, put 1 to 5 full-time staff on working on software improvements. Slightly smaller organizations, say from 50 to 120 engineers, had 1 to 3 full-time staff members assigned to the improvement activities. Smaller organizations, 1 to 50 engineers, often set up volunteer committees in the organization to focus on how should we improve the way that we're currently developing our products. Now it's interesting, in one particular case, there were probably 25 engineers at this organization who set up 3 volunteer committees to study such things as what process should they be using, what metrics should they be gathering, etc. And the engineers in this group were so excited about all of these improvement activities and what was happening because of them that they all signed up for 1 to 3 of these volunteer committees within the organization. Lots of buy-in there. So why do I think groups around Schlumberger have succeeded in trying to improve their software engineering? Well, one of the key things, I think, is management leadership. The management has been strongly behind these improvement activities all over the company. The group set up specific goals, things that they wanted to accomplish, based on the business, based on what was important in the products that were under development in that group. If the organization needed to get ISO certified, then that certainly helped with another motivation behind the improvement activities. There was strong training support, as we talked about earlier, and the engineering teams were really involved in these improvements at their organization. Let me not pretend that every group around the company has been extremely successful in their improvement activities. I wouldn't be completely telling the truth. Some groups have failed in some of their improvement tries because of some reasons listed here. They tried too many things. They decided that, well, we have 20 key problem areas, and that's what we're going to focus on, fixing all of these 20 things at once. That's not what we advise. What we tell groups as they start working on product and process improvement is to focus on 7, 8, maximum of 10 different things at the first time through. And then step back, take a look, and come up with some other areas in which process improvement or product improvement is needed. Some groups failed because they decided that technology was going to be the ways in which they improved. So they focused on buying new different types of machines, new different types of third-party products, that these were going to be the, quote, silver bullets, as Fred Brooks would say, in fixing the ways in which their products were being developed. Technology itself alone was not the answer. Other groups included only weak members of the organization on their improvement team. The biggest problem that I think this caused was that there wasn't credibility with what the improvement teams would suggest doing and what the engineering staff felt were really the key problems and the key issues in the organizations. So these groups had trouble with their process focus. Lastly, in some groups, unfortunately, a crisis was needed before the improvement initiative took hold. So until the group saw that they were really in trouble, they didn't believe that they needed to work on improving the way they did things. This obviously wasn't true, but sometimes the crisis was needed to push this through. We've found as we've worked with groups on improving their software engineering practices that 12 to 18 months is needed before significant improvements can really occur. Some groups have had us come on site to do assessments and said, okay, please come back 3 months from now, we will be much improved. Well, we've refused to do this. We have found that it takes at least a year for an improvement to, let's say, take hold, to really become part of the culture so that the product itself starts changing based on that improvement. We found that organizations that were already ISO or AQAP certified, AQAP is NATO's Allied Quality Assurance publication, were ready for improvements, which meant that using the SEI improvement technique and further assessments were something that they already understood because they'd gone through this type of improvement activity already. Another key thing that we found over and over again were that the groups themselves must decide how they were going to improve. The group had to have ownership of the improvements that were going to happen in that organization. What we did when we visited the groups was to make sure that we would raise issues, submit findings as far as here are the key areas that we suggest you work on first. But the groups themselves would come up with the ways in which they would work on those areas. We didn't come up with the improvement steps. The groups had to do that for themselves. Let me give you some specific suggestions for what you can do in your organization to start these improvement activities. One of the key things, I think, is to make sure that senior management is involved. You want to make sure that the management knows both what's going on with regards to improvement activities, as well as make sure that the improvement activities are based on business goals. What are important things about the products on which you're working that you need to focus improvement activities on? Another key point is to make sure that everyone associated with the software is involved in the improvement activities. Marketing, hardware, manufacturing, sales, customer support. Whatever groups are affected by or affect the software development and the software engineering being used need to be involved in the improvement activities that are going on. As I've mentioned over and over again, the developers have to be involved in defining the activities and the process that's being used. I think a key point to make here is that you don't want to have just an improvement team assigned or appointed to working on the improvement activities, but make sure that that team is closely tied in with the developers, that the developers feed information to that team or participate on that team, so that it's not just a team of people saying, here's what we've decided we're going to do in our organization, but it's the entire engineering staff saying, here's what we want to do to improve. If you have a written process, or let me be more strict here, when you have a written process, if you don't have one already, make sure that the process is customizable to suit the needs of the different products, different sizes of projects that are going on within the organization. What we found was that one process does not fit all, even within one group. And we made sure that people, engineers in the organization, could go through steps to slightly modify the process based on the product that they were developing. You want to keep momentum, keep persistence, make sure that people are excited about what's going on, excited about the changes, and keep the vision on long-term goals. What are we trying to achieve here with the improvements that are happening? Another key thing, I think, to do with the software improvements is to have some type of rotation set up so that the individuals that are working on the software improvement staff see a career path. You want to rotate them in, say, every year to 2 years into the software improvement activities and then back out from the software improvement activities into the engineering groups, either as individual contributors or as management staff. That way, I think an organization remains fresh in the ideas, the problems, the issues that are being discussed as ways to improve the products that are being developed. What are some more challenges remaining? For us, at least, at Lumberja. One of the things that we keep getting asked is, okay, you've been working on process and product improvements. How much money has it saved? Well, I have to tell you, we don't know the answer to that yet. One thing that we really have to do is quantify what our return on investment has been for the investment we've put into all of these process and product improvement activities, so we know how is it going in a financial sense. We need to continue following up with supporting technology, products, tools, etc., to help the people that are working on improving the way they develop their products. We also need to do a better job, I think, of assisting the middle managers. What we've found in our organization is the middle management is often caught in the middle. The senior management thinks product process improvement is a great idea. Let's do it, and sets goals and objectives. The engineers know of problems in developing the products. They want to do these improvements. Let's go for it. And the middle management then finds that they're working on product and process improvements with exactly the same schedule, exactly the same resources that have been in the organization all along. This is something that we need to do a better job of working with the middle management on how to work with being sandwiched in the middle of these two goals. The other big challenge, I'd say, for us is to extend the idea of software improvement to product improvement. I mentioned earlier involving marketing, sales, customer support, etc. in the activities. What we found as we were working on software process and software product improvements were that if the hardware engineers weren't involved in the improvements, then no matter how nice a document we had written defining the software process or what new steps we had put into the product cycle, if our counterparts in the hardware side weren't involved or weren't making similar changes, then we weren't strongly enough affecting the overall product improvement itself. So I think it's important to involve the entire organization so that the product itself and the whole process for developing the product gets improved, not just the software side. Some changes that we've seen in the organization over the years that we've been working on process improvements include the business units taking more and more ownership of the improvement activities. Many of the business units now are, I'd say, taking the lead in coming up with new ideas, new things, new ways of handling the process improvements, whereas ideas initially would have come from the software practices group in Lumberja's computer science lab. They're now coming from the business groups themselves. We also find that a number of the organizations are focusing on the improvements by setting up yearly quality improvement plans. So each year, different sections, groups of people, product teams are getting together in January and February to decide, for my group, not for my overall organization, but for my group, here's how I want to improve the way we do things. And these written quality improvement plans are being included then as performance objectives for the individuals on that team. The other thing that I think is happening more and more, but that certainly started even at the beginning, is that a number of the groups are doing what I'll call self-assessments. Individuals, say, on the software improvement teams or just individuals in the quality assurance group do assessments at regular intervals, not too frequently, but regular intervals to make sure that the improvements are happening before a more formal SEI assessment is done at the organization. So keeping the motivation on continually throughout the year. So let me sum up. What have our improvement activities been? I've mentioned a range of them. And all of these are something that you might want to try in your organization. They've certainly have worked for us. Again, we've done such things as using the software process assessments as a strong motivation for starting improvements in the software process that we do and use to develop our products. We've done training in-house with experienced people within the company to get the course material together and to present the course material. We do collaborative projects to make sure that what we're saying actually works and then refine what we're saying based on the results of that interaction. We keep watching what's happening at universities and in industry around the world to see if there are new techniques or ideas that we should be trying. We help groups with ways in which to measure the improvements that are happening and making sure that the changes that are taking place are the ones that help improve the business. We work as well within industry, setting up partnerships with other people, again, around the world, in parts of the industry that are also working on improvements. And we talk with our counterparts in these other industries saying, what's working for you? What's not working for you? again, coming up with ways to get better ideas on what we're doing. And I guess, as an obvious final point on this slide, we communicate. We make sure that people know what improvements are working, what isn't working. I guess one of our lines that we like to use is saying, no news is bad news. We want to make sure there's lots of news out within the organization on, hey, this is happening, this is working, here's our success stories, to make sure that everybody remains focused and motivated on what's going on. Thanks a lot for your attention. I hope that you get some good ideas out of everything that I've talked about that you can try in your organization. And good luck on your software process improvement, software product improvement, and just product improvement activities.